So I'm Steve Marchand. If you're here, you probably got this through the Politics of New Hampshire, my Substack. If you did not, then please go to stevemarchand.com and you can read my work there. You can also subscribe, free or paid option. Can't be bashful about that. But one of the real pleasures of being on the Substack app is the ability to do this kind of informal live Substack format that has proven to be pretty sticky. We've gotten thousands of folks that watch each episode, especially after we download it. And that's why I'm so excited to have Christian Urrutia here. Christian is running for Congress in the First Congressional District of New Hampshire. That is Chris Pappas's district. It's one of the most purpley districts in the country, which means that this open seat, almost by default, becomes one of the most interesting primaries for Congress in the country in 2026. But it's 2025 and the 2026 political season is well underway, which is part of why I'm so happy to have Christian here today. Christian, how are you doing as a candidate here now?
Yeah, well, look, Steve, first, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I don't know, is show the right term? Maybe it isn't. I don't
I don't
know.
know.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Today. But look, things are great. We're coming up on a month into the campaign, and it's been, I think we've had a great reception. I think we're doing exactly the things we want to be doing, and getting our message out and connecting with folks. And what has struck me is we're in 2025, in the middle of summer, but so many Democrats are so engaged right now. I think folks understand the stakes. They understand that it's not only about the elections that are going to come up at some point. We're going to talk a lot about that probably in the next hour. Um, but it's also about the moment we're in right now, and how do we be as best of advocates as possible against the Trump administration. And so there's just a ton of energy right now. I think it is enthralling to be in the race, and it's been a great month for us.
So, as you said, the time flies. It's been a month and the field continues to grow. I'm beginning to lose count. We have, and it looks like we'll have more candidates likely joining in the days to come. So, one early question, which maybe stitches well into getting into your biography a little bit too, for folks that don't know you yet, is in this crowded field, finding points of differentiation is going to be critical, right? Even high engagement Democrats, the kind of activists who are going to vote in a primary, endorse, volunteer, donate, they're going to be learning about almost all the candidates as well. So you have to find points of differentiation. So as you begin, how do you see the opportunities for folks to differentiate, what you're bringing to the table over other, high quality Democrats who are also running? How do you do that in a field like this?
Yeah, well, look, let me just start off. I think that the size of the field's a testament, again, back to the energy, and I think it's very good. I think this is a very healthy thing. You have a healthy number of candidates. They're running. There's a lot of energy. Folks are going to make each other sharper, and we should be welcoming of spirited policy debates that I'm sure are going to unfold over the next year. To me, when I think about what differentiates me, it's my life experiences. I have, look, I consider myself so lucky in so many ways, because to me, I'm the first generation immigrant. My family was born in Spain and Mexico. I'm the first of my family born here in the United States. And so I've had the privilege of kind of seeing that immigrant experience, building off of that, being informed by it, and going from being able to bagging groceries at Market Basket to working in the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon, and having been appointed by the president to do that, and a bunch of stuff in the middle too. But to me, that is, a differentiation. I have, gone from very much working class background to being in some of the most kind of important decisions that we made in national security space during the Biden administration. I think that's a testament to how special this country can be. It's obviously under assault right now, but how special the country can be. I think that's a big part of my story, and I'm happy to more unpack it more than that. But I think that the breadth of experience is ultimately what I would say would set me apart.
Yeah, I want to go back. I'm a first generation American as well. We're all part of the NAFTA coalition, I guess. I'm Canadian. So,
Yeah.
first generation American. And certainly that has colored how I look at the issue of immigration, how my family members discuss immigration. How- as a first generation American, how does that personalize, particularly at a time, ICE and what appears to be increasingly aggressive activity, frankly, as they seem to be going further down kind of the draft board of looking for people, often people that are have some significant issues, but then in the process, seemingly rounding up folks that do not have any of the issues that they say they're prioritizing, legal issues and so forth. How does that hit you? That you think is different because you are a child of immigrants? Does it get you angrier? Does it hit you in a more emotional way than maybe those folks that don't have our background as immigrants kids?
I think there's so many people that are standing up on the side of the Constitution that their families come here in the 1700s and the 1800s and are far removed from that experience. And so, to me, I think it's actually incredibly affirming for folks to say, look, like one, we need people to follow the Constitution. We have due process in this country. We expect it. We don't like people being targeted because of the way that they look, because of certain approaches that this administration is taking to attempt to what they would say is enforce the law. And to me, ultimately, um, what the biggest challenge that I see is coming to my family, coming to America, and the experience that I've had in America is of a country where, you know, everyone that's here is part of our society. It's part of our community. We're all in this together. And I think there's a lot of forces right now, especially coming out of this administration, that's really trying to tear folks apart. And we, like the Democrats, and I think folks that have come from a first generation experience, but not exclusively, I think they get that, how important that like national unity is, because that is ultimately the hallmark of being an American and being here in the United States. Um, to me, the way the administration is pursuing this is, I mean, it's just trampling on the Constitution and basic due process. And, we, the Democrats, I think it's important. I've talked about this, we got to be comfortable talking about, well, we need an orderly immigration process. We need secure borders. Yes, if someone has committed violent crimes in this country, with due process, we should take steps to remove them from the country. That's all perfectly fine. But we also have to say, you know what? We actually just need to solve this problem, because this has been around now for decades. We've known that this is a problem. It's getting to a feverish pitch. It's only going to get more challenging for us. We really have to focus to do it. And I think this is one of the classic failures of Washington. It's known that this has been a problem for a while. It's been unable to drive solutions. There's been people that have really pursued it, frankly, both Democrats and Republicans. I can think of, like, McCain back in the 2000s certainly tried on the Republican side. And there's been many really great Democrats that have too. Um, but I think we really need to be thinking about, how do we solve this problem in a constructive way, because this approach is just abhorrent.
On that, and I on the close-up interview over the weekend, you mentioned this need for Democrats to fight back better, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, more effectively, more pointedly, fight back better against the Trump administration. And on a number of issues that are high priority to voters in polling, immigration's one of them. Democrats, if we put ourselves, or Republicans have skillfully politically put Democrats in a defensive position on a number of pretty meaty issues, including immigration. Where do you think Democrats have kind of dropped the ball, either on a policy or political side,
Yeah.
that has put us in this place where we're playing defense on some pretty important issues right now as we try to, win back the House and so forth in 26 and so forth?
Yeah. I think the thing is, we have to be unabashed about the way we present our views. So let's take the immigration, like just what I've laid out. Like, you can simultaneously believe in a secure border. You can scientifically believe in an orderly immigration process and say what ICE is doing is abhorrent. It needs to change. This is not American. This is not consistent with our values. This is not consistent with the way we think about how the United States enforces the laws and the rules. And and to say, well, we're not going to be comfortable, I don't know, congratulating ICE during the middle of these roundups. That's one of the bills that or I don't know if it was a bill, but it was um, a procedural motion that the Republicans had on the House, and that Democrats felt really squeezed to say, "Oh, we feel like we have to say yes, congratulations, guys." I think we have to be just a lot more unabashed about this, and I think there's been a number of instances that we've seen over the past few months where you say, "Well, it's time to just say." This doesn't work for us, and we're not going to be scared to say that. The reality is, politics, so often people don't want to get into nuance in politics, but I actually think there's a real hunger for folks to say, hey, a little more nuance is not the worst thing in the world right now. And there's a lot of people that are hungry for that, to show some real depth and an ability to say, you can simultaneously think in a secure border, and you can say, maybe we shouldn't be breaking up families for someone that's been here for 2 decades and hasn't, broken any laws in the process. Maybe we're not okay deporting that person. Those two things can coexist, and I think most Americans get it, frankly.
Well, and if you look at the polling about Americans' views of Donald Trump 6 months in, generally supportive, plus more than 50% on the general idea of being tougher on immigration, but have a minority of Americans, we're talking under 40% in a lot of cases, that say that they like the execution of the idea, and which no one has ever accused the president of nuance. Certainly, it's just not it's not how he communicates. And it does seem like he has been effective at owning broad concepts, the economy, trade, the border, in on his way to the presidency. But then on the execution of it, even as he has achieved some of his goals, he is becoming less popular as he is more successful at achieving what he is hoping to do. So you would think, like I saw this the other day, and we could talk about this in the context of trade. We're beginning to see some of the deals getting finalized, if not down to the
Yeah.
penny yet, like with the EU
Yeah.
on trade. But it seems that as he is doing more of these things, the public, his popularity on these issues is down below 40%.
Yeah.
Democrats are having trouble right now with that as well, but he's certainly not popular, even as he is successful at doing what he promised he would do. Is that a nuanced thing? Is that indicative of the fact that Americans are not so easy to paint as red and blue? What does this sort of mixed message indicate, in your opinion?
Well, I think there's an element of truth. I think when you actually start looking at a lot of political beliefs, you actually see people. It's not that clear of red versus blue for not a swath of America. There obviously there is some polarization. I'm not saying anything remarkable by saying that. But what I think people are seeing with these policies is, in the abstract, in a campaign, to a lot of Americans, they sounded okay. But in the execution of it, you start seeing the real costs that come with it, the real challenges, that the fact that this isn't going to work that well. And this administration has never been good, whether it be in the first administration or in the current one, of actually executing things in a very thoughtful way that lends itself to good policy making. And the thing is, it's really hard to campaign on that. I don't think the Democrats have been like, oh, let's walk you through the nuances of policymaking either. That's probably not a recipe necessarily for success. But the reason I think it's becoming so increasingly unpopular is the vast majority of people, going back to the immigration debate, for example, are not comfortable with masked agents pulling people off the street and disappearing them. and without their family having any idea what's happening. And these people have been here for decades in the United States. They've been working jobs. They have mixed families. That people are not comfortable with that. But they're seeing that execution. And it's same with the tariffs, where you start looking at the tariffs. It's been incredibly chaotic. Like we've experienced this firsthand in my family. My wife has a small business. Her supply chain is as an internationalized component. You can't make decisions. It's any day you might get a Truth Social tweet that changes the cost of the goods you're procuring by 100%. Like, how can you plan your business? And there's a lot of Americans that are in that same boat that are saying, this is nuts. Like, we can't work like this. And so that's where it gets you. This administration's execution has been atrocious. And I think once people actually see what this actually entails, they're not very comfortable with it. And this is, I think we're going to continue. We're at the beginning of the beginning, frankly. There's going to be a lot more of this, unfortunately. It's really important that we just kind of gird ourselves for what's next.
In terms of the beginning, some of the impacts of decisions that have already been made, like the big bill there that became law recently, a lot of that won't kick in immediately, which gets me thinking about healthcare.
Yeah.
I mean, the sort of platitude from Republicans that the way we'll save the money without hurting people is that we'll do the classic, it won't hurt you, it won't hurt me, it's going to hurt the guy behind the tree.
Yeah.
And the guy behind the tree is just too lazy to get a job, and that's why they're on Medicaid. And now they won't be lazy, and $1 trillion will pop up. In this primary, one of the things that I know talking to activists on the healthcare front, when you go back to like the late 2010s, probably right after Bernie ran the first time,
Yeah.
the Medicare for All topic was very hot.
Yeah.
And I think has sort of, it's still very important. The topic of healthcare is a top 5 issue, Democrat, national, what, it doesn't matter. But the Medicare for All is a little less. I know you mentioned on the close-up interview,
Yeah.
Medicare for All.
Yeah.
I think we had Carly Berry on a few weeks ago, and she has also indicated support for that. Other candidates have not talked about that yet, so I don't want to characterize or mischaracterize their positions. Talk a little bit about where that is in your campaign. Healthcare in general,
Sure.
Medicare for All as a central part, I presume, of the healthcare discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I start off with principles. And my first principle is everyone in this country deserves healthcare coverage of some kind. And that healthcare coverage has to be affordable. It has to be predictable. It has to be fair. Those are the principles I start with. And when I look at what is the best way for us to achieve it, it is by leveraging our Medicare system. Ultimately. And I think Medicare for All is the best pathway to do that. The fact of the matter is our healthcare system is, and I probably don't have to, say this to your viewers. Like I think everyone, I don't have to say this to the vast majority of Americans. I don't think no one thinks it's working really well. The amount we spend in this country, I mean, it is 2x per capita than any other country in the world, and our outcomes are worse. And we can go through the data on that. People really are hungry for something different. And to me, leveraging the Medicare system is the best place to start to do that. It is the most realistic solution. It is something that you already have a very robust place from which you are starting. And look, let's be candid. Moving to a Medicare for All system, it is a big undertaking. It isn't something that is just going to happen overnight. But I think it is the most realistic way to get to that principle of universal coverage that is fair, that is predictable for all Americans. And it in the long run too, it'll save us money. That's the great thing about this debate. It's like it's morally right, it's economically smart as a whole. There are some powerful interests that don't want it. They don't want Medicare to be empowered to negotiate drug prices. And we have to have the political courage to fight back against that. But to me, that is central to achieving a just and fair society. Is everyone knows someone's going to have your back if you get sick. That's a fair shake. And to me, Medicare for All is the most realistic way to do that in as short a time span as possible.
One of the things going back to feel like the old man on lawn, is back in the day when I was running for office. One of the things that I was surprised Democrats didn't talk more about was that we could be the party of entrepreneurship, of new business formation, of small business formation. And that's where most of your net new job creation comes from. It's not from big established
Yeah,
employers, as important
I
as they can
totally
be,
agree.
right? Dynamism comes from it comes from entrepreneurship. And the biggest impediment to new business formation, to somebody doing that awesome thing of leaving an employer to take a chance on a new idea and start their own business, is the healthcare element,
Yeah,
because of the risk that goes into not having quality healthcare, reliable, affordable, quality healthcare follow you, even as you decide to take the plunge and
yeah,
do this most American of things and start a business. And it strikes me, whether it's Medicare for All or something similar, there's a real opportunity there to put it in the context of a pro entrepreneur agenda in a place where the Republicans seem to own that word right now.
yeah.
But
Well,
policies that I'm not sure support that link.
no, I think they don't, because they ultimately, there has to be, if you have to decide between, well, if I get really sick, am I going to be able to take care of myself, or am I going to take this really big risk? That's a really hard ask for a lot of people. And look, my wife lived that firsthand, in setting up her own business and in making the decisions of, okay, there are, it was before we were married. It is like certain things I want to do. How do I make sure that I have the right medical coverage? How do I make sure I can afford it? How do I make sure that, I'm taking the basic things I need to do to take care of myself to then pursue this dream that I have? And we can be the party that says, you know what, we're about actually giving everyone a fair shake in this country. And that means if you are an entrepreneur and you have a vision, you're going to get healthcare, you're going to get access to small business loans that are easy to obtain and that are fair. We're going to be investing in small businesses to really build the American dream. Too often, as we're seeing right now, in certainly the Big Beautiful Bill and other Republican initiatives, so much is catering to incredibly wealthy interests that I don't think they need that much more help, frankly. I think what we really got to be focusing on are these small business owners that are really, the ones taking all this risk. They're really the backbone of so many of our communities, frankly. When we think about the businesses we love in a community, it's normally not the really large multinational companies. These small businesses that are owned by one person, maybe they employ 4 or 5 people. Those are really important. Those are the backbone of our communities.
And I think in New Hampshire, we see a disproportionate high percentage of folks that are self-employed or in businesses of, depending how you classify it, 5 or fewer, which is often a sole proprietorship or a single member LLC, something like that. And all of these policies have just disproportionate impact on them, and healthcare is a part of that. Now, let's go back. You touched on it at the beginning, and folks that watch the close up, and I would encourage folks to do that. It's on the WMUR.com website. And I suspect you probably have it up in some form somewhere as well. We'll let you do shameless plugging before we go
Sure.
today.
Sounds great.
That's your job as a candidate.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Happy to do that. Happy to do that.
right? You got to do that. Is your background. So you've done a number of pretty interesting things for somebody, if you don't mind me asking. So how old are you?
41.
All right, 41. Now I can say I remember being 41. This is, here we go. So good for you. Uh you've done a lot for
Yeah.
41. And private sector, serving Biden administration, serving in our military, your academic background, working for the state of New Hampshire, well, in the state of New Hampshire. Talk a little bit about that variety of
Yeah,
backgrounds,
sure.
which I presume probably gives you some really good opportunities to connect on different issues based on those experiences.
Yeah, well, let me give me just a little latitude to go
Yeah, sure.
a moment or two. Let me start at the beginning here,
Okay, yeah.
right? So, like, well, right, like as I talked about at the beginning, my parents came to the United States from Mexico and Spain, and first of my family born in the United States, and after kind of figuring out about 4 years old or so, we settled in Hudson, New Hampshire, and to me, like it was just the classic kind of kind of first generation American immigrant experience. We lived in a 2-bedroom home, but I had the great benefit of having both my grandmothers there, and these were grandmothers that one grandmother lived through World War One, Spanish influenza, the Great Depression, World War Two, and everything else that happened after.
Wow.
Right, just incredible breadth of experience at such an early juncture of my life. And, otherwise, it was very much the kind of classic New Hampshire experience going to public school. I think every, middle class kid takes some summer jobs that then turn into, kind of job to make some money to fund a little bit of their life and maybe save up some money if they want to go to college. And so for me, it was working at Market Basket at 14 and continued to bag groceries until I went to college, basically. And then got an opportunity to go to the University of Iowa, where originally I wanted to go there to be a writer, Steve.
All
And
right.
I wanted to be the next great American writer. It didn't work out. Like any good lawyer, I'm a frustrated writer. And so I ended up going to law school. But before that, that's when I started really getting kind of involved in politics.
And at U Iowa?
Yeah, at the University of Iowa, I did some stuff in New Hampshire too, but it was really Iowa to really
Yeah.
in college. And it was when, John Edwards, obviously before he had his, personal issues,
Yeah, yeah.
but that early message that he had resonated with me. I was really opposed to the Iraq War in 2003. And so that really spurred some real political involvement on my part. I ended up working when it was Kerry Edwards when they were running for president. And then I got the bug more and more, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do the midterm elections out there. And I worked for a gubernatorial and a congressional candidate. And those both Democrats that got elected in that 2006 wave, the same wave that brought other folks here in New Hampshire in this very district
Right.
that was like, the grassroots just powered so much of that election. It was really incredible to watch.
And so in
Yeah,
'06 cycle, were you still at Iowa at that point?
I was mainly, that is mainly Iowa.
Mainly Iowa.
I was
All
out
right.
on
Before we go, I have to
a
ask.
small
I have
city
to
called
ask you.
Davenport in Iowa,
So I
where I
have to ask you before you go on. I want to keep going. I like this. So I know you're super busy, but I'm a big sports guy,
yeah,
and so I'm a big Caitlin Clark fan.
yes, same,
So you're a few years removed from Iowa, like
yeah.
young, but a few years removed. Like, does that any friends from undergrad, all that kind of thing? Like, does Caitlin Clark end up invading your social media feed because of your U Iowa
Yeah,
background? Does that
there's a lot
rise?
of Caitlin Clark, especially I mean just when she was really cresting at Iowa and then
Yeah,
the WNBA. I mean, I mean she's an incredible basketball player. Yeah, Caitlin Clark. I mean, it's got it. I think you have to say the best athlete Iowa has produced. I would say just like
I
I feel
just
very comfortable saying that it is like just
I think you're right.
a generational talent. Just really incredible basketball.
If she endorses a candidate for president, which I don't anticipate. I think she's going to
Yeah,
stay out of that stuff.
yeah,
But
probably.
there are few non-political figures in American life at the moment that I think would make more. We're talking Taylor Swift levels of juice if
Yeah.
she decided to get involved in a competitive political race. I don't even know what party she is, but um, she has put Iowa at a different level on the map
Yeah.
for sort of rank and file people that didn't go there, aren't from there. She has invaded everything in my sports loving life. So knowing you're a U Iowa undergrad, it takes on a whole thing. And then you went to law school.
Yeah, I went to law school, and so I went to University of Michigan for law
Tom
school.
Brady,
Yeah, Tom Brady.
unbelievable.
Yeah, and I had the great benefit there. So when I was at Michigan, I figured out that you could once you were paying your tuition, and with the law school was what kind of one of the more expensive schools. So taking out all this debt, and I was thinking, oh, I want to do a master's as well. I figured out I could just take all the master's classes essentially for free because I was paying the top rate that you could. So I just did both my degrees at the same time. And I was
Nice.
like, okay, this is fantastic. And so came out, with a bunch of debt, a few $100,000, but and came out during the middle of the financial crisis. And I thought I had a great job lined up at a really just a phenomenal firm. And it it's they said, hey, we got to give you like a year a year and a half, and then maybe you can start your job, but we'll see if we have a job for you. So then I took my first job at the Hillsborough County Attorney's Office, and I was working in Nashua and Manchester, and it was a great place to kind of like cut my teeth. Just starting off, and was spent the better part of a year. I mean, it's got to be pretty close to a year, all in on that, and then ended up having the real opportunity to go practice international law and human rights, which is really what I wanted to do. I was very hungry to do that, and so spent almost a decade all in working on those issues. Took on, really big, large human rights case. Was one of probably the work I'm the most proud of, which involved a political activist in Chile who was brutally tortured and then killed for being in opposition to the Pinochet regime. And his wife spent 40 years trying to track down her killer, find out who it was, and hold the killer accountable. And the law firm I was at was engaged as pro bono counsel. And they were like, hey, Christian, would you be wanting to be one of the lead attorneys on this? Um, and so I took that case on, and we spent, I mean, I went to Chile, maybe a dozen times to build the case out. And we brought it to a federal jury, and we ended up bringing accountability after 40 years. And I talked about this on now this is a bit of a getting sidetracked, but I've talked
No, that's
about
okay.
when
No,
I
no, we
talk to
got time.
folks,
This
I,
is
I
good.
think a lot about that case right now, because that is a testament to when the rule of law breaks down, as it did in Chile at that time, to when the rule of law works, which is when we brought the case before an American court, an American jury, held the person that committed these brutal acts accountable. They were living in Florida. That's why we ended up having the proceedings in the U.S. And then we're able to have the person extradited to face criminal charges in Chile for his acts. And so I think about that a lot, because it's like rule of law doesn't work, rule of law works. And right now we're thinking a lot about the rule of law and how it is supposed to operate, especially when you think about the powers that the government can wield on individuals that they disagree with. So I've been thinking a lot about that recently. But anyways, so did that, and then, yeah, gosh, I would have been 34 or so, 35.
Okay.
Started thinking I had wanted to serve in the military for a long time in my life, but with 2003 in the Iraq War in college, I ultimately um, was not comfortable at that point in my life joining the military. And one road leads to the next, and leads to the next, and leads to the next. And I have so much respect for everyone that serves in the military, whenever they've joined. Like you're gonna, I'll never say bad about anything bad about someone that's put on the uniform. Um, but in 35, I decided, I actually do want to serve. So I put my legal career on hold, enlisted in the Army, and went to basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, with just the most incredible group of 18, 19, 20-year olds. I was like a grandfather.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, were you
Yeah,
an outlier on the age? Is that
I was the outlier. Uh, the outlier. I was like, I was by far the oldest, by maybe 8 years or so. I was older than my drill sergeants, Steve, just to put it in perspective. So,
ah,
yeah, it was but it was an incredible experience. I'm so happy I did it. And then, after going through the training, they asked, what are you interested in doing? I ended up as saying, I'd like to be a judge advocate, so a JAG, a lawyer in the military. And then they're like, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, I want to defend soldiers when they have criminal proceedings of some kind, or misconduct proceedings, or whatever may come about, where they should be able to avail themselves of legal counsel. And so I continue to serve here in New Hampshire in the National Guard as a captain. And I think that's just a really important part of my life. And I'm so just happy that I was able to step up and do it at 30, at 35. Um, and so amongst all that, in 2020, I did link up with the Biden-Harris transition before the election, and they wanted someone to help run part of their vetting operation uh, with them, and within just an incredible group of attorneys that were also doing that with me. And we ran that process for 6 months of like, what does that government look like as we walk people through the process and feel comfortable with them and providing recommendations that ultimately go to the most senior folks that were going to be in the government and help ultimately inform the president-elect at the time decision making. And after that, for 6 months, which felt like 6 years, it was very intense, 6 months of my life. I got an opportunity, an appointment by President Biden to go to the Department of Defense as special counsel. And so that is nested within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And it was ultimately advising on our most challenging national security issues, from questions of operational law to international law to human rights considerations, and then some of the stuff that you don't even think about that the Department of Defense has to deal with. But yes, they have massive contracts and massive amounts of money flowing through, and that ultimately leads to some sort of legal disputes too. But a lot of time spent on kind of those really heavy international law questions that are kind of at the core of what the department does. And so did that for a few years. And then I had an opportunity to help lead a group of mix of attorneys and policy folks in tackling questions of anti-discrimination, human rights, and privacy at Airbnb. And it's like, how do we uphold these values and execute on them? And it's a big commitment that the company's made. It's a big commitment. I'm very happy and proud of the work I'm doing there, and proud of the team that I work with as we tackle that. So yeah, that's been that was a little long. I get it,
No, that's
but
all right. We know we
kind of
hit a lot of
my
stuff
experience
there.
in a nutshell. Yeah. So
The international law. It was interesting watching the close-up interview that MUR's Adam Sexton. I
yeah.
think he found that uniquely interesting. He seemed to hone in on those experiences for several minutes of the interview, and it was interesting. Um, there's a lot going on around the world. Obviously, one of the hotspots that gets an enormous amount of attention is in Gaza. And there's a lot in the news right now about the balancing of the right of Israel to defend itself, the treatment of civilians in Gaza. We're hearing different reports about how people in Gaza are faring during the conflict. How does your experience in international law, human rights, it seems like you would be uniquely in a position to be able to be part of a sophisticated evaluation and discussion about how we should be traversing that conflict as the U.S. right now. And we were talking before we came on. It's easy to turn this into a simplistic one side, other side, black, white, everybody's perfect or you're the devil, and that's the end of it. How do you deal with this given your unique background and experiences?
Yeah, I mean, to me, what I start with again is like the principles and the values that should underlay what I think is the ultimately American foreign policy. And to me, human rights is one of those core principles that we have to stand with. And so when I see the situation in Gaza, when I see people that are being cut off from getting basic food supplies, medical treatment, when I see people being shot trying to obtain aid, that is inconsistent with those values of human rights. And the reality is, yes, conflicts are very messy, very challenging, but we have to expect, not only out of the United States, but also out of our partners, especially the partners that we support, that they will abide by their human rights obligations. And we have to push for that consistently. The United States has an incredible amount of influence in the world, as long as it wants to exercise it thoughtfully. And this is an area where I just incredibly disappointed. I mean, this administration is disappointed in a lot of ways, like don't get me wrong. But when it comes to this area, it has been just very, very disappointing to see that we haven't put this question of human rights first. And the reality is, to me, this is also an investment in long-term stability in the region. You can't. The status quo cannot continue. It is immoral. It is inhuman, and it also make that region more dangerous in the future. And we have to be willing to say at the same breath, though, of course, Israel can defend itself against Hamas. Of course, Israel can defend itself against Hezbollah. Of course, Israel should do what consistent with international law, what it can do to obtain the return of the people that are being held hostage. Those all can coexist, but we have to be willing to have the kind of the international political courage to fight for that.
It does seem like this is yet another major issue where nuance is a required element of smart public policy. And yet, in the public discourse, it is nearly impossible to try to have a nuanced conversation, certainly in soundbite form, without getting accused of not taking a side or avoiding the issue. I think there's this when actually what you're doing is trying to take an extra moment to explain the nuance of all this, and because of our unique power in the United States, if we sneeze on this, the region gets a cold, and I think even within Israel, there is debate about where the nuance lines are. Where is the difference between the state of Israel
Yeah,
and the current government of
right.
Israel? And these are two different things that are often getting conflated in all these discussions.
Yeah, I mean the war has in the conduct of the hostilities in Gaza are controversial within Israel. I mean the Netanyahu government is controversial within Israel. It is not, monolithic, and it's very easy to kind of zoom out and look at things as such. But the reality is, just as the Iraq War was incredibly controversial here, and other conflicts have been, it's a lot more complicated. But to me, what we can control in the United States is what is the position we take as a country? What are the values we espouse? What do we expect out of our partners in the world? We have to be a lot clearer and be willing to actually fight for those values. I think they need to be at the center of our foreign policy.
You mentioned in the course of your life story, um, some of your more current work with Airbnb. So it's interesting because when you describe your role at it, kind of the niche within the
Yeah,
legal element, it is not the role that most of us everyday Americans who have engaged with Airbnb, right? Where we go on a website or on our phone. The last time I used Airbnb, I had a car problem at the Canadian border in Machias, Maine, trying to drop my daughter back off at school in Nova Scotia, and it was late at night. There's not a lot going on way up north in Maine, and we could not get a hotel. And we go online, we find the one spot that had reliable Wi-Fi in the area, and find it's in the middle of the winter. And so there's a lot of empty places because it's more of a summer destination.
yeah,
And we find it's perfect, reasonable price, and available with no notice with a car that we were worried about driving down the street, much less across the rural parts of northern Maine. That is the experience of most people with Airbnb. That's kind of, we use it that way. You describe this kind of human rights, international law element that is it's exotic compared to the way that most of us would engage with this ubiquitous Airbnb. So, like, take me under the hood a little bit
yeah, sure.
about the kind of work that part of what you do. How does that connect with somebody like Airbnb the way we all know it?
Yeah. So look, let's take the anti-discrimination front. I think is very clear. So, we have basic values that we believe that people should not be discriminated on the basis of their ethnicity, on the basis of their religion, on the basis of their sexual orientation, and other what we would call protected category groups. And to us, like, that is like basic in housing and in having access to amenities. And there's a very complicated and challenging history in the United States and through the world when it comes to this issue. And so for us, and the work that I do and work with my colleagues on, is like, how do we ensure that Airbnb is a welcoming place for everyone? That, the person, no one's gonna come to you, Steve, and say, "Oh, I didn't notice you're a Canadian American. Well, I'm not so sure
Right.
about having you stay here, right? That is like ultimately, how do we thoughtfully ensure that we have thoughtful policies and rules and procedures and a strategy for making this a really welcoming place for everyone? And I consider myself really lucky to be able to have the kind of the privilege to be able to work on these issues, but because I think it's really important. And frankly, when we think about tech and we think about where it's going and some of the challenges we're going to face in the future, these questions of the impact that tech can have on shaping experiences, shaping access to people, and ensuring that it's not done in a way that considers kind of these immutable characteristics that we think should not be the way people are defined, is really, really important. And just that is really what the main focus area of my work is.
Yeah, that's interesting. In the few minutes we got left, we'll finish up by 1 o'clock here today. But a couple other issues that I hear about in my own work in politics. I'm curious how much it's coming up in your early days as a candidate. The role of AI.
Mhm.
That is it. Your legal perspective, your work in the private sector. Uh, where do you see the government's role in this, rapidly evolving field of AI, where it seems like so much investment is going in, so much change is occurring? You hear the country's leading entrepreneurs and experts on AI describing not in decades, but in years,
Yeah.
as in like 2 years, 3 years from now, pretty significant changes in what people on the ground's lives may look like, including even our employment.
Yes.
Uh,
I mean, we're already seeing it. You're seeing it with Gen
yeah.
Z coming out of college. Unemployment rates are higher, and a lot of people would attribute it to AI already causing displacement effect. So
So
sorry, I didn't
what do
want to
we
cut you
do
off, but
with
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Look, I think government has to be smart policy makers when it comes to this. At the same time, we need to harness the great promise that AI can put forward, but also be sober minded that it is going to be highly disruptive, especially when you think about jobs, displacement of jobs. How do we ensure, and this comes back to how do we ensure everyone gets a fair shake in this country? That what we don't have is a bunch of folks that are displaced, that don't have an availability to compete for other jobs, that are facing economic insecurity because of AI, that there's a concentration of the gains and the benefits from AI in the hands of a few, and also that it doesn't shape our national narrative because one or two or three or a handful of people have coded our AI systems, our large language models to give certain types of answers. And that's where I think government can play a very thoughtful way. But we have to also understand, like, if it's not being developed in the United States, it will be developed elsewhere. It will be developed by authoritarian governments. It will be developed by the Chinas of the world and the Russias of the world. And we have to ensure we're at the forefront of this evolution. The amount of capital and energy that China is putting into AI shows that they see it as a critical element of their national security infrastructure and their ability to form global opinion. We have to just be very sober minded about that we are in a competition as well, and we don't want to stand in the way of that. But it has to be thoughtfully, especially in a domestic sense, thoughtfully channeled in a way that allows us to ensure we have a positive discourse in this country that's fair, that free speech is not limited by AI in different ways, and also that the impact of it is smoothed out as best as possible so that everyone can feel the gains of AI and not just a small minority of people.
What's an issue that is not getting talked enough or at all, maybe, about, particularly in the federal discourse, that you think is something, 5 years ago or 3 years ago, we might have said AI, but it does seem like that has graduated into a top tier issue in the general mainstream media and the political context. Do you see issues that maybe 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we'll be talking about a lot more, but at the moment, we're not talking very much about, or we're not talking about enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think one topic we're going to continue. I'm going to slightly reframe your question because I
Sure,
think it's
yeah.
one of the enduring problems that we have is housing in this country, and the lack of it, and it's only going to get worse. And it's really tackling this in a thoughtful way. Look, we're 4 million homes short in America right now. That is not an easy lift to build, and it's only going to get more challenging, regardless of what's happening necessarily in the interest rate environment. Like, we have a supply demand imbalance, not enough supply, a lot of demand, and so we. I think as a country, this is going to continue to be at the center of a lot of the challenges we face. And it is incumbent upon government to help find some of the solutions and drive to create an affordable housing in this country. If people can't afford to live somewhere, that is the main focus of their day to day life. That is the main stressor in their life. That is the main challenge they face. All the other stuff, it's important, but it's not going to be as central in their mind as that. It is to me. Housing, wages, healthcare are so critical to people feeling like they're getting a fair shake in this country. And I'm really worried about it because I think this has to be where we focus ourselves as a country. It's like, how do we make sure that everyone is getting that fair shake? And so I get it. We're already talking about that. We're going to be continue to talk about it because I think we haven't done a good enough job over the past few decades, and this is a lot of part of the Republicans. It's also part of sorry, the Democrats, frankly, to do better when it comes to the questions of how do we get everyone in this country a fair shake.
On the housing issue, one of the contradictions that seems to make it more difficult is over the course of my life. I'm 51, but over the course of my lifetime, the idea of one's home, if you're fortunate enough to have purchased a home and live in a owner occupied home, that it has gone from the place you live to your most important asset.
Mhm.
And as pensions have dramatically declined over the last half century, personal savings, except for a brief period during the pandemic, are generally heading the wrong way. Social Security was never designed to be one's sole retirement income. It was supposed to be supplementary in a world that had pensions that allowed for personal savings and so forth. That more and more people have designed their retirement plan around constantly escalating home equity and home values. Again, if they're fortunate enough to be in a home. And if you're not,
Yeah.
good luck with that, right? Because going up 8, 10, 12% a year in a lot of the country. So at the same time that we've built this economy that is telling you, buy a home, build equity in it, and then when you retire, you've got your nest egg and it'll be worth a lot more than when you bought it. Oh, and by the way, we need to build a ton more housing in your area because we need to slow down that growth in the value of your house because it's making it like a balloon floating into the sky, impossible for somebody to catch. These seem like a contradiction that we built an economy on that. And yet we're like, wow, now housing's too expensive. We need the people in the community to vote for zoning change, let's say, that makes housing more affordable. But then maybe they feel like it threatens the value of their own home in the long run. Um, I mean, this is both parties have had a hand to play in it over the last half century. But what can we do about this contradiction in housing?
Yeah, well, look, I think you're spot on that when you actually look at the data, it's probably about the 70th percentile or so, the major asset people hold in their life in terms of the amount of money they have is their home. It isn't the stock market, it isn't defined pension plans, it isn't 401ks, etc. So to me, but it is ultimately like it isn't just the housing market is not a monolithic thing. It is different places, different pressures, different asset classes ultimately in terms of the homes. The fact of the matter is that to me, it is just the clear national importance that people need to be able to have access to homes. And part of it too, though, is some of this pressure is like there are major private equity groups that are buying a lot of homes that should be going to starter families, to people that can actually like live in a community and build a life around that home. We have to, like, that is, to me, we cannot have that. We cannot have private equity homes buying single family homes across this country and squeezing people out of the market. We need thoughtful solutions, but that to me is just completely inconsistent. At the end of the day, my North principle is my kind of like guiding star is, do we really feel like people are getting a fair shake to start a life in this country? Right now, I'd say the answer is no. And part of this is people can't afford to buy a home. Some people can't afford to rent a home. Wages haven't gone up enough relative to the price of housing. We need to find a fundamental solution. It's part of the reason why I think this country is getting kind of torn apart by these forces.
And I mean, it appears to be the bullseye issue at both the state and national level, this broader issue of affordability. When you hear people talk about housing, whether it's state and local property taxes, they're worried about the future of their job, grocery bill. I heard somebody this morning I was talking to about a different topic who said they're looking for a politician who talks less about House Bill 198 and more about my grocery bill.
Yeah.
And I think that on some level, it's almost primal. As you said earlier, it's housing, it's your health care, it's your groceries, it's the future of your kids' education. These are almost primal in their importance to most American families. And the party and the candidate able to connect on that most primal of levels to understand it and to offer some relief, I think will be very successful, not just in 26, but I suspect we're going to be, as you say, we're going to be in this for a while. This housing issue is not going away.
Yeah, well, we have to find solutions for people's everyday problems. Like, if we don't feel like we're doing that, as you know, and when I say we, I mean government, and I mean
Yep.
people that are running for office and political parties, there's something fundamentally wrong. Like, that is like what is driving people's challenges day to day. Right now, it is largely affordability. If we're not at the center of that discussion, if laying out exactly how we want to solve these problems, we are failing. Has to be where our government is and where the Democratic Party is and where candidates are, certainly where I am. I'm going to continue to make this the centerpiece of my candidacy because I think it's the most important question we have.
Well, that's a pretty good place to end. But before we do that, shame on me as a recovering politician to not provide ample opportunity for your promotion of your candidacy in all the various forms. People that want to learn more about you, issues,
Yeah.
they want to donate, they want to find out
Yeah.
where you're going to be. Lay it on them. Where shall they find
Best
out?
place is the website. So
Okay.
www.urrutia.nh.com. If you search Christian Urrutia, it'll come up. That's the best place. And yeah, that's the best place to find out where I stand on the issues too. Lay them out. More content is coming. It links you to all the social media sites as well. So it is the best channel to really learn about this campaign. And thank you, Steve, for having me on the show and for your thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it.
Well, one of the goals here is to get, obviously not just candidates for Congress, although that apparently could fill up a season's worth of programming at this rate, but also folks involved in civic life. We'll have Republicans on once in a while that want to have a thoughtful discussion where you can agree to disagree and maybe learn a little on both ends in the process. But in this primary, so important for Democrats to be successful, to hold this seat. Chris Pappas, who has been uniquely successful in his 4 elections, but his success, I think, masks the challenge of this district. This is one of the more neutral political districts in the country. And just because Chris at times made it look a little easier doesn't mean it became easier. And so it's really important early on for folks to get to know all of you. I would encourage folks to check out your website if you hear that your local Democratic committee is going to have Christian or other candidates for that point running. Please take the time not just to learn about Christian, but I can tell you as a former candidate who's been in your shoes, that's where I learned more. as a candidate about what really is hitting home for people, you become a better candidate. And it doesn't happen in empty rooms. It happens when folks show up and engage with Christian and the other candidates that are running. So I hope folks will do that. We'll kind of try to keep everybody going on it. Again, stevemarchand.com is the Substack. Try to write several times a week about all things in New Hampshire politics, both local and state, and of course, federal. And for some of the political activity I'm doing, you can go to the YouTube page, and this will be uploaded here for folks that want to see it again, or if you want to share this later, this will be up on my YouTube page within 24 hours. And of course, you'll be able to get this on Substack at stevemarchand.com as well. So with that, I want to thank you, Kristen, very much again for you're very generous with your time today. And you're very generous to give in the bigger picture and run for office. It is not easy, but it is necessary. And if good people don't run, well, the alternative is not so good. So we're really pleased that you're doing this today and that you're running as well.
Well, again, thank you, Steve, for having me on and for having this dialogue. And longer form interviews are good. I think that we need a little more of that.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that's tuned in and will tune in.
That's right.
Listen. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you again soon. And I hope you enjoyed today's show. I'm Steve Marchand. Great to have Christian Urrutia here today. We will see you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Steve Marchand Podcast. You can hear all episodes of it at iTunes or on Spotify. Also, catch my work on my YouTube channel or on my Substack, which can be found at stevemarchand.com. Thanks again for listening.